But the European colonists, once they were driven out of Africa, they kind of forget about Africa for many decades. So Africa was a forgotten continent for many decades. China was the first country to really engage with Africa in real earnest. China and African countries look at each other completely as equals. We are brothers and sisters.
After years of neglect by Western countries, Africa found China as a reliable friend and a sincere partner. How important is the China-Africa bond? Victor Gao, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization, shares his take with me.
The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, it is going to be held in early September in Beijing. How does FOCAC facilitate investment infrastructures projects across Africa? And what are some notable examples of successful initiatives funded through this cooperation?
China was the first country to really engage with Africa in real earnest, starting from the end of the 1950s, because we know most of the African countries were in colonized situation by mostly European countries. And starting from the 1950s throughout the 1960s and 70s, there was this huge wave of decolonization in Africa. China has always been supporting the decolonization program and the independence movements of the different African countries, for example, and China even fought with the African brothers and sisters together to help them to achieve independence from colonial rule. However, the European colonists, once they were driven out of Africa, they kind of forget about Africa for many decades. So Africa was a forgotten continent for many decades. But China was involved with the African countries, fully engaged even as early as in the 1970s. China, Tanzania, Zambia jointly built the railway from Zambia to Tanzania to the Indian Ocean coast, for example, which was a huge connectivity project by the standard of the 1970s, at a time when China itself was not very well developed, and when China did not have a lot of financial resources. But China did it as an amazing thing, and it really boosted China-African confidence. Now, especially since 2000, China not only traded with Africa, China also invested in Africa, and China has been emphasizing to different African countries the importance of connectivity. Without connectivity in terms of highways, roads of all kinds, railways, airports, seaports, etc., you really cannot generate greater productivity and efficiency in your economic endeavoring. Since then, China has been focusing on BRI, for example, which is a major connectivity project. And then China and different African countries have also been talking about the importance of manufacturing. Because without manufacturing, you really cannot command a higher premium for the goods or the commodities, raw materials you come up with. It is eventually through manufacturing, high level of industrialization, and now aided by high-tech of all kinds, that you can really expect to uplift the people out of poverty in Africa. Now, the other thing is about this agricultural cooperation between China and Africa, because from the Chinese perspective, if the African countries can really get their acts together and cooperate with major countries like China and several others, Africa can achieve self-sufficiency in food production. Now there is no food sufficiency in Africa. Hunger is still a major problem, and abject poverty is still a major problem for many countries in Africa. They need to build up the connectivity projects. They need to set up more factories, initiate more investment into manufacturing, and really beef up their agricultural production capabilities. Now, all these, I think, will be discussed within this China-African cooperation framework. And I think there is a lot of expectancy and expectation among African countries that China can really help them and cooperate with them, because China and African countries look at each other completely as equals. It's not like, oh, I'm above you and you need to be lectured and you need to take what I say as the truth, etc. No, between China and Africa, we treat each other as brothers and sisters, we respect each other, we respect our differences, and we see these differences as reasons why we are so strong together, and then we cooperate with each other. So I think all this sets China apart from many other countries.